Thank you. Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to this conference on rethinking Chinese childhood in modern history. I'm trying to roll back to the beginning of this. So I prepared a brief presentation. It's a great pleasure and very exciting that Professor Jackson, along with you, have prepared this feast. I prepared my address after reading your text, so this is truly for you. If we were to seriously rethink, now that we have plenty of work, we have enough work to reconsider things. All right. So those were verbal sounds that children made at the turn of the 19th and 20th century when trains and other things happened in the world. I like to begin with that by taking us back to the intersection between pre-modern and modern history, and also in our child studies to think a bit about non-textual materials and fieldwork that could and help us to think about some of the conceptual and structural implications of our works. This is the simple outline. I want us to ask about what are the real possibilities of all of the studies that we share together, and to think about what these could mean more. Because in childhood studies, people, reading our works before and on, tend to think that these works belong to a category of scholarship that filled up a hole, like women's studies, like discovering of lives of beggars and lower classes and of people of the margin. I read your papers with great pleasure. They carry on these investigations on schoolgirls, maids, scouts, girlhood, perhaps with some similar logic in mind. At least people could have, in the beginning, have that impression. Scholars continue to reveal, uncover lives of children during the war, during the Civil War, and because they try to add significant chapters to earlier, seemingly incomplete understandings of human experiences, about leisure and study of the young. So people may react to your works in that fashion because they feel that we are picking up some lost puzzles and patching things up. And we may even have such assumptions for ourselves. But in doing so, there's an expectation that the continuous discovery or rediscovery eventually made up. Is it really so? That collectively, these studies we do may be moving forward, um, moving toward some rethinking of issues that inquiries related to the whole child may compel people to reconceptualize the basic intellectual frames behind usual understandings, that noticing children at the margin will compel investigators to move forward in a systematic overall reformation of our knowledge, to help us questioning about why these and other matters have been neglected, missing in the world of knowing in the first place. Yet as soon as the missing puzzles are picked up, put to the master picture, something else could have happened. We realize that it might not fit it perfectly. It tends to disturb the whole picture. It could do that at least as well, even to blur or distort the main frame to the point of potentially undermining the assumption to begin with. And this process could go on. So I'd like to share with you two examples that from my recent studies. One about non-textual evidence from visual arts, the other about field work from marginal children. You could read, I would send, this is being published now in Diogen, about my work on the children at play, artistic representations of children from certain Song dynasty. All right. So I will be brief by simply saying that, compared with European arts, the Southern Song children at play strike people as natural but exceptional, because even though by now people would not, take Ariet's thesis literally, still, they look so different from the Madonna and the Child, the Holy Family, so to speak. That's not the real child, actually, or the little princes and princesses from the European court before the 17th century. Because these full-size children at art, at play, by professional artists, painters from Southern Song, usually in a set of 4, now we're left with maybe just 2, on very frail paper, but in detail and lively, it's really, really hard to call them little adults, miniature adults. That's by Shu Hanchen and his son, and these are professionally produced with a big market, both artistically, theoretically, and representationally. They had not been studied. They're difficult to study because 20-some years ago, I met art historians at Princeton, and they say that you're going to have to do it, historians would have to do it. The art historians would never have the detailed understanding of what's being depicted here. All right, I could show you a few more, but you could always go back to Taipei and see it. They don't show it very often, but if you put that together with other depictions, like village prattlers, showing nursing mother openly breastfeed, during the day with 5, 6 little kids. You look at each one of them, what they wear, what their expression, their physical proportion, and you could also look at what they were depicting, about boys and girls cracking fruits and petting rabbits, kicking balls, sometimes flying kites, kites, exactly everything that Master Zhu Xi had said that kids should not do. These were, in his way, quote, useless things. Weeds. All right. So in terms of cultural representation, what's happening? The visual materials, the non-textual and textual materials, if you put them together, or if you put them together with what I call technical literatures, that had not been touched. These literally tens of thousands of cases on pediatric medicine, the practitioners, right? And you see that also 清明上河图. So you see that this is a multivocal society about looking after children, observing children, representing them, or being with them, recording them, whether you're artists or your parents or your physicians or your teachers of teachers. So we've got to think about how they were represented. I want, you could read the papers, I will send it to Isabella later, about how in the longer tradition of depictions of human portraits in Chinese art history had developed from before the Tang down to the Song, on to the Ming and Qing, and down to this period. In 2005, Shanghai still has a exhibit of Yingxi Tu. And of course, some of you are familiar with Yang Liuqing's Mianhua, these New Year's greetings. All right, so that's my first example. What do we do with the non-textual materials, the objects, the shoes, the clothes that we could still see in the museums of deceased children, of people who have, infants who have been drowned. Okay, second, I would like to show you, this is a field work I've started doing from 20-some years ago in Maju. You could look it up about where Maju is, lying in between Taiwan and Fuzhou in the Taiwan Strait. And there they use not even the Taiwanese or Hokkien as we refer to, because they use Mindong, Eastern Hokkien language as opposed to the Southern Hokkien. It's been referred to by anthropologists as Hokkienese. All right, if we're going to use those, I worked on that for 5 years and I returned 1.5 years ago. It's a string full of 20-some islands in 5 to 6 clusters. So, I got to do this only after I uncovered and worked through the archives. It's like discovering your own Pompeii, really, when I was doing it, because none of these, they read to me, when you read them, they're like mud blocks. But, we recorded children's activities. Eventually, with limited release, we published in 3 volumes called Children from the Open Sea. And because, first of all, there are 87 kids with 28 teachers. We were the accidental visitor, and that we were trying to use modern tech to connect them by internet so that they have pals, and they have to teach their teachers before they can be helped. But they're like the Alaska children who have 28 different words for eyes. They could tell you that their eyes, their sand, we walked to the beach, I'll show you some pictures. They say the sand would die. It's true, because the snails are of smaller size than the sand grain there. We recorded that when the islands were being demilitarized and becoming the number 6 national park. If you go there, I hope you will eventually, and you will see that this is pirates' heaven for 5-6 centuries back. And you could still see the relics. They knew exactly what to do. They don't need to be taught, really. Although they don't know what traffic light is, or don't know how to make a carrot out of Play-Doh, because they had never seen any, but they knew everything else. They took one look at the sky, would know whether my helicopter would fly the next day. They have all the knowledge although they might miss McDonald's, they ask these questions. And there are all these endangered species of plants and birds that are visiting them all the time. Do we need to cite John Dewey really? When I walk the walk, I started to uncover the archives, about these cutthroat islands. They were pilots, or I call them, forced trade, armed trade, led by women, with over 200 boats back 300 years before I visited them. Then during the Cold War, they became the forefront for a while, and now we're in the 21st century. All right, so this is what they would do because they could give their God a right, and because their God, like themselves, also needed food often. So instead of shipping wood trains from Europe and give them Christmas, these kids were trying to help their gods to fill up the stomachs in the winter uh, um, cold, harsh season. There were the lighthouse that were built in the mid 19th century by the British sailors. And when you were hit by surprises in life, because I got drafted to visit them, I spent 5 years with them. We eventually produced individual videos of each and every child of every household. And you could see from the rocks that these were rocks formation, from 5-6 centuries ago when, these pirates, they're called, fleets, sail from Japan down to the Philippines and on. By then, there are fewer than 5,000 civilians. So I was reminded of, because I had my first job in the Midwest, United States, and we were listening to Garrison Keillor often, and he said that there are these villages that he, in his stories, where women are strong, men are beautiful, and children are above average. That's the thing. That also reminded me when I started my study about different, fundamentally different understanding and definitions of children, whether we bypass biophysical modern understanding and get to the complicated social and existential understandings when we're trying to tread a different path. So we are we have always in our company these works from European and Western worlds, but we're always reminded by those children around us, and they embody a social and cultural life that's not only meant to be an additional missing puzzle. In terms of philosophically, in terms of ethics, there are just lots and lots of things that we could do. I'm going to quickly come to my conclusion. Actually, you could read this quickly yourself, and then I would trust a copy of this to Isabella later, about physical time, about multiplicity, about the existential and ethical implications, fundamentally about when we dig up these things, thinking that we simply need to fill a silence or vacancy. But we also need to acknowledge that there could be some preconceived barriers, and then the baggage, which really came from prejudice. So what about listening to silence and seeing the world? I have a small section in my Stanford book that posed that question. I continue to pose that question, which is a happy trouble, I must say, a good burden, that I hope to do it together with all of you when I read your works. Can we really learn to listen to the effect of silence long enough and tellingly enough that the effect begins to yield different impacts to the very meanings of sound, as the musicologists and linguists used to do sometimes with their subjects, that or like art historians, they teach about empty space. Architects do that too. They ask their students learn to decipher the use or create the value of non-existence, to show people the force of open air. As we continue, when I read your works, I see that each and every one of them, and I try to make that exercise, that each of your work could do that. That in terms of theory and method in historiography, children and childhood studies in modern China could have something fundamental to offer. I sometimes at this point would play, a recital of a poem from 2,000 years ago, from before the Han Dynasty, literally, but it's about everyday life, that says that things we have miles and miles to go, that we must try to stay well and be strong. So that's what I had prepared for you, to thank you and thank Professor Jackson for this occasion. And this you've heard. I'm going to play it a little bit again to help us gather some questions and have a conversation. This is a Hakka lullaby.
Thank you, Professor Hsiung, so much. I think you've given us a lot to think about there. It was a tour de force, bringing childhood from the Song dynasty right up to the present day.